Hi, welcome to the Sense Kaleidoscopes podcast. And today we will be looking at different learning environments or educational pathways that we believe can help shift the narrative for autism. Vahini, um, do you want to start by establishing what has happened historically in the space of autism, specifically in India, if we can stick to the context, and help us understand how the space has evolved? I mean, I could give you a start as saying early interventional setup was something that came into the space when I was just leaving the country. So, can you take us from there?
So I think special schools have always been there for as long as I can remember, at least my lifetime. It was predominantly for students who had either cerebral palsy or mental retardation, uh, some sort of physical inability, disability, um, the blind, the deaf, the mute. Um, for everything, there's always been some kind of support system for at least a good 40 years. Um, However, autism emerged much later because earlier the information was not enough for a good diagnosis or for a label, and they were possibly classified into an MR kind of
Yes.
bank. That said, I think Spastic Society opened a school. There was one Mrs. Veronica Matthias, whose daughter Tanya is someone that the Bangalore Autism Fraternity knows, because she's possibly the oldest person on the spectrum that we all came across. Mrs. Matthias worked and liaised with the Spastic Society of Karnataka at the time. And then was born the Autism Wing at Spastics. Initially, it was not tailored to, the whole wing was not tailored to autism. I think Tanya has to go in for individual sessions off and on. But then I think as the diagnosis started coming to light and more people were diagnosed on the spectrum, um, there was there were openings. They opened a full-fledged unit specifically catering to autism. Now, there was a wave that happened across the country. Action for Autism in Delhi with Mary Barua, because Mary's son Neeraj was on the spectrum. There's a similar movement that happened in Bombay, in Chennai as well. So, just taking off from all these places, there were specific units designed. People were learning along the way.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, trying to understand their own child, it was mostly parent professionals who stepped forward because they wanted their children to get the best um, attention that they could, given whatever constraints were there at the time. Strategies that were working for, say, an MR or a CP child
Did not show any results over
didn't
here.
wasn't very positive with autism. Then, when they got the label, they started reading up schools of thought and understanding, working with other schools, basic behavioral schools of thought, whether it was Freudian or Adler or Skinner or, whoever it was. So, all this was happening. And they developed, I think the Rehabilitation Council of India finally came out with one course, and they said, possibly this is what you have to do to be able to be a certified licensed special educator in Karnataka or India or whatever it is. So it's set up that thing. So then you have started having, in addition to this, it was not only Spastic Society of Karnataka, right? Like there were a whole bunch of other schools, private schools, who had started. And one thing was very clear, that early intervention needed a lot of focus.
Correct.
Right? So if you find a child who's on the spectrum from the ages of 18 months all the way up to like the first 3 to 4 years of the child's life, the chances of getting the child to cope better in the neurotypical world, being on the autism spectrum, was higher, and that's what they noticed. So hence, irrespective of what box of severity the impairment was causing. So from there, they mushroomed a whole bunch of early intervention centers. Um, you know, so many. While diagnosis was still, at least until say about 10, 15 years ago, I don't think diagnosis for autism was being pushed uh, by clinics or hospitals. It was my dream at one point that just like Amitabh Bachchan was advocating, check your child for polio, give him or her the polio vaccine. I was hoping that somebody would say, at least get your child checked for autism. It's just a small checklist which can be displayed while you're waiting. This was the pre-mobile era, so while you're waiting at the clinic, waiting for the doctor, you look at so many posters, right? Can we just put up a small, kind of checklist so that the parent is at least aware while they're waiting? Now, most of them are on their phones, so I don't know whether that makes sense anymore. But yeah, it was early days as far as that was concerned. Fast forward to a couple of years later, not couple, maybe 5 to 6 years later, um, because of early intervention or because of quick diagnosis or whatever, there were many children who were slightly impaired but were able to manage in the mainstream curriculum or at least in the mainstream environment for a uh, large part of their time. Because of which, I think there was also internationally, there was an inclusion conversation that was happening. So then sprung the next wave of, schools which had inclusion uh, of students who were um, able to integrate in spite of their impairment, um, with some kind of support. So you either have a shadow or you will have a separate resource room where the child with autism will go and spend some time, and then they come back to integrate for sport and cultural activities, or the other way around, saying during certain stressful academic sessions that the child with autism was going to another place. So I think that's where we are at now. um, I don't think I can put a finger on whether inclusion in in the full sense, works or doesn't work or whatever. I think it's based on the individual, based on the kind of support that they are receiving outside of this inclusive setup in their community, with everyone around. Also, what is the level of impairment? How is it that what is the child's cognitive ability? And like our last episode, what is his or her emotional and social quotient sitting at? How are they able to self regulate? So, a whole bunch of factors. I think you and I have seen lots of main children who have gone to mainstream and come back. I think we've successfully integrated people, but then I don't know whether the inclusive environment is truly supportive, if the child is moderately impaired. If it is very, very mild, maybe it works, but I haven't seen anybody kind of totally thrive. I feel from a vocational point of view, I think the your colleague or the professional environment is kinder. I think children can be very mean. Uh, I think they're the meanest of the lot. They can be really mean, and I don't think um, our kids are ready for that yet. It's difficult to kind of for me to say this, but it is true that it's that child is also trying to learn, trying to regulate, even the neurotypical child. So, and for getting some kind of peer affirmation, the child might do certain mean things or whatever it is to fit in with the clique or whatever. But yeah, it is difficult for to ensure that the child is well rounded and protected from early onset of or any onset of mental illness or depression or anxiety or bullying, and fairly protected. It is difficult because as much as we have inclusive setups, I am not sure what the schools are doing to sensitize their own, um, to be more sensitive to persons on the spectrum.
Okay, just going back to touch back on where you started, early intervention centers were essentially put in place because they were looking at school readiness. And I understand from what I understand, what I was told when I came back from Glasgow, because I was away for a decade, so I missed that entire. I mean, I had seen the autism setup in Spastics along with you. Of course, I had just seen that it was installed and things were running and so on and so forth. I realized that early intervention came into space because there was integration in the mainstream schools, and then that integration failed. So there was a need to get the child back into a specialized environment so that certain skills like sitting tolerance, listening, task management, and all of that could be in place. So there could be another effort to integrate. From what I also know is that the second level of integration after the school readiness was managed by the early intervention, again, like you said, some of them went back into the mainstream setup, worked for some time, but most of them fell out. That's where the special school system came into play, and we saw the kids going into these specialized environments where IEPs and so on and so forth started to get rolled, where I guess there was more specific attention given to this is the challenge of the child. Based on the challenge of the child, what is actually important to be achieved at this point in time, and what are the gaps, and how we are going to work on it. I think for the milder ones that managed to go through the primary schooling and the fallouts that happened in the secondary spaces, which is something that we are seeing even today, there are and were very few options. Even now, I think there are not very many options. Most of the spaces that we have are remedial setups that look at some kind of a combination of pre-vocational programs, some kind of work readiness, and so on and so forth. I just find it very, uh, I don't know what is the word I should be using, but I find it very exhausting that we are always looking at this word readiness with education that is connected specifically in the special needs area. Um, I don't even like calling it the special needs area, to be very honest, but for the lack of a better word. Um, it feels like we're always trying to get the children ready for something. While I understand that it's important to get any child ready to live a certain quality of life, here the goals that are being set, I feel, are sometimes not completely aligned with the holistic development of the child. And because the goal setting, like I remember you speaking in one of the last or one of the second or the third episode where you said if I am to work with a child, then I will sit down with the parent, with the educator, and I will try and understand what is the long term goal. And once you establish that long term goal for me, I will start working back. I'll backtrack and I'll start putting things in place. I don't think that these educational systems are essentially working in that format. That's one. And I also feel that learning environments by themselves became very narrow because you started with a very narrow goal by saying that I'm going to get you ready to get into lower KG. That's one goal. I'm going to get you ready to go into a neurotypical school where you will be able to sit with 15 children and run through the sessions like how it is run for any other.
Isn't it a very neurotypical way of thinking? If you and I went to similar schools, what was the goal? That my child should get through 10th standard. That was the goal. So if
Yeah.
that is going to be your goal, then that is how they're going to function. What are you and I talking to neurodivergent parents about? Where do you see your child? That parent is going to say, I see my child working in XYZ organization, um, leading an independent life, taking care of his or herself, cooking a meal. These are the conversations we have. A neurotypical parent is not faced with these questions. So, hence, I think the education system in the mainstream world will revolve only around empowering that child to finish their whatever 10th standard, 12th standard.
Get a job.
whatever.
And
No, 10th standard, 12th standard. Job is only, college's job is job.
yeah. What I'm trying to say is that when you are designing a learning space, and here when we know that the need is different, it's effectively established, because I'm not even going to process data the way a neurotypical child processes it. Okay, that is established. My neural wiring is completely different. I have sensory processing which is completely different from the neurotypical mind. Hence, the learning environment will have to shift. The goals will automatically shift, anyways. If we were to think of it from that perspective and say that there is a different need, it's a science based need. It's not even something that we are imagining, right? So we know that we are going to have impairment with communication. We know that there is a certain way that the data needs to be designed and the curriculum needs to be designed so that it can be then implemented so that the absorption can become easy and not traumatic. So many students that we have met have told us that they see no value in the education that they have gone through and in the NIOS exams that they have actually cleared. And they have not even implemented that. Like, they are not doing anything fruitful with it. So why put an individual through that many years of education at all if it's not going to be of any value? That's something that I always keep thinking about. And are we not really killing the motivation aspect also, which is very, very important for educational environments to be building?
What do you mean by motivation?
I believe very strongly that if I have to build purpose in my mind for my life, then I have to have the motivation to wake up every day and do something that I find meaningful.
That is right, but I'm just saying, at what stage do you take that decision to say, okay, mainstream schooling is not for my child?
I feel when you see your child struggling with simple tasks, and
Talking only of people on the spectrum.
yes, very much, very much. I feel when you see a child struggling with simple tasks, shutting out their environment as opposed to wanting to be involved in that environment, it's a very good cue to tell yourself
Explore
that
other
this is,
options.
can I look at something that is more feasible? Can I look at something that is more friendly for the child? I Though the inclusive schools came, one of the things that they did do is to reduce the number of the students in the classroom. But if you ask me, from the work that we have already established, I don't think we can do even more than 3 children in a classroom, to be fair.
No, but Akshay, I mean, from your experience, out of the students who have gone to mainstream schools, right? How many of them on the spectrum have made friends on with people who are neurotypical?
I won't say just friends with people who are neurotypical. I don't
Not
think-
have interacted.
Yeah.
Have made friendship.
No. They do struggle to find those deep connections, which is what you are referring to or what I would refer to as friendships, right?
But you do see those friendships in your own setup, right?
Yes.
You have seen that there are students in your own school who are friendly with each other, who really like there is true friendship there by the sense of the word, right?
That is again observation. We are able to observe that and identify that. I think if anybody else is looking at it who doesn't have an understanding of the space, would not
They
be
do
able to
not.
connect it to as this is a true friendship. It's because we are in the middle of those students. We know them for so many years, so we know what is building over there. Coming back to educational or learning environments, and the reason I'm talking about this is because we spent the last 2 episodes discussing regression.
Mm.
One of the constant concerns in this space. I get so many calls from so many parents telling me about their children who are in mainstream schools or in inclusive setups, and then their children and them as parents struggling with a way forward. If the IQ is high, where the cognition of the child is good, and the child is able to learn in that classroom environment, then the child will be struggling with people, that is, with social and emotional tasks. If the IQ is low, then we know for a fact the child will be struggling in all of those 3 areas. There's no doubts about it. And for whatever reason, it's always brought back to autism, Vahini. That's my concern. The conversation always comes back to the child has autism and hence there is a problem. The conversation is not around the learning environment is not suited to the child.
See, learning environment is being constructed by a neurotypical for the neurotypical, by the neurotypical. Everything is only neurotypical. For me to adjust the environment to a neurodivergent slash person with autism, I have to make an extra effort. Not because I can't do it, but do I have to do it? Okay, so I will always cater to the majority. The majority always dictates how the world order is going to function, whether I like it or I don't like it. And this is where I am saying that inclusive setups, unless you are going to cater to the autistic mind, I do not see it really thrive. I don't see my students or a person with autism thriving there at all. You're not catered for that. You're not sensitive environments. You are the big bad world. You want your child to function in the big bad world. I don't think that young age that child should be ready for it. I see people in the neurotypical world. I run an audio engineering enterprise. I run an audio engineering school where 90% of the parents turn around and say, no, after degree we will send them. The child is not interested in pursuing that degree. So I've had so many students finishing full engineering, then coming back and joining much later because that's when the child is so frustrated and says, here, Amma, Appa, take this degree. Now I'll go and do what I want. But that is the truth. There is this obsession for conforming. There is obsession for saying, no, my child has to finish school, college degree. Only then, is he he can do what he wants. Why? Okay, till high school, maybe because certain skills are required to be an audio engineer or whatever it is. Oh, no, music field is weird. I mean, I don't want to digress from autism to thing, but I'm just trying to draw parlance here. And very clearly, like, I see this all the time and I see it more starkly even in the neurotypical world, that this obsession to conform to being stereotypical is there across the globe. Everybody wants to, and it is for a reason to fit in. And if I am not going to make those changes, right, even in an inclusive setup, if I am not going to equip every single person in that inclusive setup to be sensitive towards that person on the spectrum, that is not possible in an inclusive setup. It is definitely possible in a special school because we are all mentally only functioning with neurodivergent people. And I think while we talk to each other as neurotypicals, we manage to function. So I'm saying if you cater to the lowest common denominator, then definitely everybody is catered to. But I don't think you want to change. I'm quite cynical about this. I'm sorry. But I don't think people are even intent on making spaces accessible and available to everybody. I think it almost comes across to me as a check box, like a tick in a check box. That's it, like nothing else. Like, because at some level, you are not catering to the most affected or severely impaired. If you did that, then the rest of it will just follow.
Okay. So I understand why you don't feel you feel disheartened with what you were saying, but let's try and talk about, I mean, at the same point in time, you've built Sense Kaleidoscopes with me, right? And I'm very keen on policy. I'm on the shift. I'm very keen because I have spent so much time watching so many of these mild to moderate teenagers fall apart because these systems were not made available to them.
Right.
And you're right about the fact that conforming to the stereotypical ideas is way more important for parents than actually trying to make that shift. But
but don't you see it actually even within your own setup, right? You have a celebrated artist, okay, who has possibly won awards. But then, or you have some other artist is well on his or her way to, make their mark in a certain profession.
Yeah.
But then you will still have a parent who comes to you and says, hey, can you help my child clear the NIOS? For what? What is he studying history? For what?
Yeah, I get it.
These are things that really bother.
I get it but isn't it also because they don't know what else? when I was working in Scotland, then we did the primary.
Are you able to push back?
I, to a certain extent, do push back. You know me very well for that. Like, I just don't go ahead and then I say, I'm not going to do it. I mean, that's not really the best way to move forward, though, because I don't know how much we are
That is
helping.
why I asked in the very beginning, saying, at what age are you willing to turn around and say, no, this person needs a special kind of attention to thrive, to be a happy. You have always said you want this student to reach his or her full potential.
Correct.
I have always said, for me, the number one priority is for that child to be happy. I think everything else will happen automatically and organically.
Yes, you believe in, yes.
I'm huge advocate. If the
Yes.
child is not happy, nothing's going to work.
Nothing's going to work. Yes, that's right.
So, as long as these two things are running in parallel, right? I sometimes wonder, what else are you looking for to, is it just to occupy the child? Is it just to, satisfy someone else? And if we're going to keep going back down this road, it is going to be a fairly arduous task to please the world. Yeah, even as neurotypicals, I don't think I can please everyone in my life.
True, true. But like I'm telling you, I feel that the awareness is low.
Of
I
course.
am following through on this path. I understand that there are these systems. I understand there are special schools. I understand there are something called as inclusive schools. I understand mainstream schooling. I understand these three things. Now, for me, also progression means something. If the child goes to a special setup and depending on the work over there, if he can move into an inclusive school, I see that as progression. If spending time in an inclusive setup, he moves into a mainstream school, I see that as progression. So I guess sometimes what has happened is there are wrongly associated ideas over here, which is what I'm trying to bust. Because people have been thinking, look, also the communication from the space. Come into my school, do the early intervention program, and then you can integrate your child into a regular school. That is the communication we have had in the space.
So in the early intervention center, who is going to equip that child with, hormonal awareness or bullying that might come from things that he or she doesn't
Or like we said, also irrespective of everything that you do to make the child ready, the fact that there is the child is extremely sensitive and is going to process emotions very differently, I don't think anything can make that child ready. And that is why I very strongly promote the idea of parallel learning spaces, parallel educational systems for young adults, children with autism. And I don't see why not. If there is justification for you to open a parallel system that can support people who can't see, people who can't hear or speak, then why can we not promote educational systems where children with autism can feel at home? I mean, you asked me the question, you said, how many of them have made friends? They actually go out, they try to make friends. We know of many stories
and
where
it fails.
they fail and then they lose the motivation to even be in a social space. They feel isolated and then they go into mental illnesses, which is something that we have been talking about in all of our podcasts. I mean, that, and also the reason why we both talk about it so much is because I think it has shaken us from the within, watching this happen around us. And no matter what we have tried and not tried, we have had our successes, but we have also had our failures.
Of course we are.
And those failures, at least for me and you, I know, because I know, as in we both have spoken a great deal, I know stay with us much, much longer than anything else.
Of course.
So, why can we not maybe put our conversation here together to help build the awareness around what a parallel system means, why we think that parallel system needs to exist, what is the value of something like that? That is where I think I want to bring our conversation to.
Okay.
Do you want to add in what you think and I will support?
No, I just think that, I remember having this conversation about scheduling in autism, putting out visual schedules, and people saying that, will my child ever function without a schedule? And I said, why would you expect a person who claimed to function without a walking stick? In similar balance, I would like to say that, if a person requires special attention, and if there are more special schools which cater to your child's interest to your child being able to thrive, reach their full potential, be happy individuals, then why would you not prefer that over a system that is a rat race, that fosters a larger rat race, and where your child cannot be happy just to keep your, to put it very crudely, keep your ego in place?
And yeah, if I can add to this, the truth is that a child always wants to feel validated by their parents as the first step, then their teachers, then cousins, larger family, and so on and so forth. And if all of us around the child keep saying that this is the way to go, then we don't really leave too many choices for that child as well. So he will push himself, or she will push themselves to try and meet that. Whether it is a neurotypical or a neurodivergent child, they will
For
try.
sure, for sure.
They will try, and that's what we have seen our children doing. But for me, the parallel system has more value primarily in the emotional sphere. When I see, also it is said, like, if you have a certain kind of pain, or if you have undergone a certain kind of pain in your life, and if I want to talk about that pain with somebody, then I would be more open to sharing it with somebody who has experienced the similar kind of pain, not with people who don't have an inclination of what I have gone through.
Oh, so that's why you think they make friends within SK than.
Because there is no that discrimination of better than you, or you are beneath me, does not exist.
But don't you see that there are some students who are more functional, both intellectually,
Yes.
and some who are less? And does the more intellectual look down upon the less?
Unfortunately, when it begins, it seems like that, but I also think that is your training of discrimination in the natural society, like how it works outside, where you have said that if suppose somebody is not able to navigate through this social scenario, then that person does not know better, right? If somebody starts screaming and shouting, then people will start attributing certain things to that person. And I feel that this child who is mild functioning and would have spent a lot of time around neurotypical environments will obviously pick that up. But in my experience, I have also seen that the more time they then spend over here,
It gets, yeah.
they become more empathetic. They start to understand things from the other perspective. They start to see truly that while I may be on the spectrum, I have lesser challenges than this other person who has more challenges. And I think it truly builds a sense of respect for each other. We take that away when we build these environments where somebody cannot sense that. So, which is why we are not seeing, I mean, even in SK, all of the young adults, it, when they're together, if we are close for even 1 day, 2 days, we are getting messages like, when is it opening up? It's just that the way they are interacting with each other, we are not doing anything much, to be very honest, to take care of their mental health. We are not. We are a very tight working space. We are 8 hours every day. We do so many projects. They have their portfolio work. They have their regular sessions. So it's very tight. But just the fact that they're in a space where everybody understands each other, they're holding space for each other, I think adds so much value to their mental health.
Given that we're talking about special schools, whether it is a special school for the gifted or special school for a person with difficulty who would require additional assistance, why do you think there is more brag value to and pride associated with, my child is gifted and hence is going to a special school where he or she will be challenged, vis-a-vis my child is struggling, is unhappy, and I think he will benefit from more um, more assistance and aid at a special school which is tailored for him?
Okay, so I'll start with saying this, that we don't have any of these gifted school setups in India. I've heard of these kind of specialized setups in the US, started by Dr. Melanie Hayes, which was also specifically catering to those with autism and ADHD. I feel that it's about branding, marketing, possibly some kind of an impression that the parent has, that it feels cooler to send the child into this kind of a space. Whereas the special school spaces that we are talking about, or we have been talking about in this podcast, don't sound very cool now, do they? So I'm not very certain if it will mean the same thing. Impressionably, as a parent, do I absorb both of those systems in the same thing? Look at how that school is also marketed, like for gifted children. We are talking challenging children. We are saying special needs. Look at the terminologies that we are associating with it. I mean, would
Maybe
you
it's
as a
also
parent...
something for the viewers to think about. Yeah, at the end of the day, you want your child to thrive, you want your child to be happy, reach their fullest potential. Why this discrimination? Why one gets brag value while one is looked down upon or shied upon? So maybe something for you guys to think about.
Thank you very much for watching the Sense Kaleidoscopes podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.
See you on our next podcast.